So, welcome. Thanks for inviting me, Matteo. Important shapes. Where to begin? I mean, I think everyone here is probably a type nerd already, so I don't need to say that they're important because you guys already know that. But before I start showing you some stuff, I wanted to give just a little taste of my background so you get a sense of what kind of a whack job I really am. I am born of Dutch family, you know, my parents are from the Netherlands, and so as a kid, I was going to Holland every year of my life, sometimes multiple times, and when I was 3, I took this photograph. Just kidding. But, no, really, I could have taken this, but no. I put it up here because as a kid I was already immediately attracted to like corporate identities and logos and typography and just kind of graphic scenes like this like fascinated me, and they like ingrained into my brain at 2 years old. You know, here, you know, you would pull into the into the airport, and you know, I would look out the window. It was the first thing I was seeing after flying for friggin' 6 hours, that I was just mesmerized by the color, the graphics of the livery and the identities. And then, as soon as you got off the plane, I was like in Schiphol Airport looking at more typography and more letter forms. So I was just like, as a kid, I was just like, you know, I was a weird kid, I guess, because this is what like made me happy. And then we'd get on the train, and I would see this identity, which I still think is like the best railway identity of all time. But the signage system in the Netherlands was awesome. So this defined me. Money. Hello. Like, don't you wish you had that in your wallet? It's gone now. And then, of course, Lego blocks were huge for me. I think they really kind of, you know, they were modules. They made you think in parts and putting things together, building things from like a set of things. So huge. These things, like, I think are critical to kind of how I work and what I like and what my whole career is based on. It's why at every moment I have working on identity projects, I try to do something typographic. You know, I've done a few symbols in my life, but typically I try to push a piece of type. And if there has to be a symbol, I make sure that there's custom type with the symbol. This one is well hated in the world, but I love it. Tire company in India, makes sense to me. Wheels. Paint company in the Netherlands, it's huge. Pretty much every bridge in the world and every like ship is painted with Akzo Nobel paint products. And even when I get into graphic design and do packaging, like in this case, I want to put a letter on it, or a number in this case, and both in this case. So it's really like ingrained in kind of how I think and how I do things. And then again, before I show you other stuff, I started to think to myself, I can't show you anything unless I show you this, because this is another project that I think is the culmination of like all the stuff I just showed you, and where it first manifested itself into a typeface. It started in school, and I had big ambitions for it. You know, obviously I wanted to make a legible typeface because that was important to me, because I was already like a corporate design nerd in school. Like, that shows you how weird of a kid I was. Like, who likes corporate identities when they're 22 years old? I do. I wanted it to have a place in editorial environments, of course institutional of any kind. Timeless, these are all givens, but I wanted to, already early on, I wanted it to be a pretty big family. But ultimately, with a simple idea behind it, and that was, you know, Frutiger was huge for me. As you saw, those airport signage was all set in Frutiger. I love, you know, classic old-style typefaces like Garamond, but I wanted to make something that had a little bit of both things. I wanted this kind of modernist flesh that you see in Frutiger, kind of just simple lines, really well kind of executed line work. But I also wanted kind of a more of a humanist kind of skeleton structure. So it was like modernist flesh on old-style skeleton structure. There were a few fonts that have done this, of course, prior to this, but this was my school project, so I just wanted to do it. So really it was an exercise of just constantly kind of looking between these two boundaries, in many ways polar opposites, and where would a font like Kivit lie. And in some cases it becomes very obvious that it leans maybe toward one direction over the other, like with the italics. Frutiger has oblique, so I kind of made a much more kind of, it goes much more to the right. So at one point, years after school, it still wasn't done, and it needed, actually at Method, I was at Method at this time, and it still wasn't even done, so it was like 3 years out of school. I was still tinkering around on it. And then we had a client that we pitched it to, and they wanted to use it, and we were like, oops, there's only like one weight. So we managed to convince them to pay for the development of other weights, and so this is another aspect of kind of why I'm showing you this project and how it defines me as well, is that this is where I first started working with other people, which has been kind of routine for me. I have to design all these typefaces together with people, because it makes the most sense, I think, more the merrier, and one, it just helps me get things done, because I also have my career as a full-time designer. So Christian Schwartz participated in the development of this. He drew the black and did the interpolations, and really kind of took Kivit, I think, to a place that is basically this. So already robust in some ways. I was after it. I was after legibility. As you can see here, some samples. And then, of course, building the whole thing out. And then what made me realize that, okay, I think I did something fairly decent here, with Christian's help, of course, was that I think I started to achieve some of those things, especially legibility. So much so that the font shop took the font and then used it in their catalogs for all the global information. So I always loved that, and I think they may even still use it for this. I don't know, but for probably a good solid 10 years, all the catalogs were set in Kivit. So I knew I was onto something with this typeface, and I knew it was working. I started to see it more and more in editorial environments. This is kind of a newspaper in the Netherlands, a zine type thing. Here's a German newspaper, literally, that is a newspaper, but it's got color in it, and it's much nicer than most newspapers. In a kind of a youthful way, I think, but it's music based. It's called Debug. Some of you may know it. And all throughout this, you would see it like in 6-point all over the place. So it was, again, legibility was key. And then it started to evolve and get, it was starting to get used in corporate identities a lot more too. So I was starting to see all the things I kind of had set out for it to achieve were starting to kind of happen. And at one point, Autodesk decided to use it as their corporate identity. And so I had some early sketches of a slab serif, and ultimately convinced them to make the logo type a slab serif, so it would kind of contrast against the sans serif. And so they wanted more weights. So this is where I linked up with Paul van der Land from Bold Monday and started working. And by this time, Christian was already, I think he may have already started commercial type, or no, it was probably before commercial type, but Christian was well on his way doing his own thing, didn't want to be bothered by me. And so now it had 9 weights. So suddenly, Kivit was getting kind of bigger than me. I was almost afraid of it. But we weren't done. We had to develop Greek and Cyrillic, of which mostly Paul van der Land worked on most of this additional work. So I think we accomplished a robust typeface. And so Autodesk kind of went off and used it for, 10 years or so. They just recently redid their identity, and they're not using this anymore. But there's some samples. Here's some other samples of it being used. signage. University of California. It's got a great web presence as well. People use it online a lot. University of California has like four different websites. They use it throughout. It's great. And so it didn't stop. There's more to come with Kivit, but it's kind of the foundation for me, I think, that all these other things have kind of bubbled out of the way this work has happened. So WDR is a German like giant media company. They have radio stations and TV networks and news stations and etc. And they called me up and they were like, "We're using Kivit. We're pretty sure about that, but we'd love to see if you had any sketches for a serif and a slab serif, because we'd like you to explore that." So and I did. So this is what their stuff looks like. I'll just show that to you, but you can see the slab serif ultimately. So they use this whole family now: the sans serif, the slab serif. And so again, this project was I did together with Paul van der Laan as well. He and I are still working on the serif together. And so this to me was like I was like in paradise, like Kivit started in school. I had dreams for it. A lot of it had come true for me. And just when I thought like I couldn't really do anything else with it, things kept coming. It's like, so it's been like 19 years since I got out of school or started this project, and we're still working on the serif. So it's like by the time we're done, it'll be like a 20-year-long kind of investment of my time, of which I owe a lot to Christian and Paul van der Laan for really helping me get it to this place. But it's kind of like a lifelong career from just working on this fucking typeface. I hate it now. It sucks. Anyway, so there you get a little taste. Some slab serif action. And there's 9 weights too for the slab. It doesn't have Greek and Cyrillic yet, but it's got the full-on 9 weights, and I'm sure Greek and Cyrillic will pop up and hit me when I don't want to do it at all. We're still working on the weights and trying to get those to work well together. But as soon as the slab came out, a Swiss guy I know who's been using Milo a lot kind of grabbed it and used it for this project immediately. Actually, I think he was even using the beta files I gave him. But it's really nice to kind of see someone take it and use it. And it's a nice project. Nice little... Anyway. So really, like, why I titled this talk "Important Shapes" is because I think by now you can tell that they're pretty important to me, at least. But they're also important for, I think, any organization that does communications. It's depending on how you slice it, it can be kind of the heart and soul of the entire expression of the organization. It can kind of hold a lot of weight of the spirit of or the purpose of that organization can kind of be embedded in the typeface itself. So GE Inspira came out of kind of I think a project where that was the intent of the typeface. It was meant to really be the kind of the main serving tray of messaging and of content, and the way you would even kind of remember the brand. You would walk away going, "Oh yeah, that stupid logo that's been there for 1890," which I like, but you also would remember the typeface. At least that's what we attempted to do. But it all came out of this. There's a new CEO, and he was like, "Imagination at work. It's not a tagline. It's a reason for being." So he was really like into, a major shift in the way they would communicate, and they knew they had a perception problem. They were very corporate, and they were like black and white, and they had like universe condensed, italic all over the place. So it was just like terrible, kind of a consumer-facing brand. So they knew they had to kind of reinvent the entire business, really, and how they talked about the business, and then how they expressed the business. So we, immediately knew we had to make it more colorful as a brand. And then my role in this was to investigate the typeface. And again, we had another counterpart in our London office at the time, Patrick Gausson, and he's a great type designer, and he began the project by investigating, I think, inherent qualities in the symbol. This kind of round, soft kind of brush stroke. And these were some of his initial studies that I think captured, if you look at kind of the softness and the fluidness of this, and try to, again, I like this idea of type as flesh. If you take that flesh and put it on a contemporary skeleton, so it has like a, that's grandpa, and then this is like the grandkid. It's got the same kind of, it's like we took that skin and flesh and like put it on a new skeleton structure that kind of felt a little more whimsical and friendly. And so at one point I came onto the project to kind of help make it a bit, I think it was a bit more display. It's still, I always consider it kind of a display typeface, but they had made the decision to only do one typeface. They didn't want to have like a text version and a display version and all of this. They wanted to be really pure and have like one typeface that did everything. And so we did the best we could to kind of let this thing have a voice, let it be very unique in some ways and have a personality, but also, be as kind of legible and usable as possible. So a tough task, not one that I think I would never say that this is a great workhorse typeface by any stretch, but they actually used it that way. They named it Inspira. That was their name, which I thought was a great name, actually. And then again, once we had, I had worked a regular and irregular italic, we had something that we felt was right. We knew we had to get other people involved, so we went to Monotype and a small team of Jim Wasco, Carl Crossgrove, and Patrick Gasson. He continued to work. He actually went from Wolf Owens to Monotype. And so he was able to continue to work on something that he really, I think, got started. So this was kind of the immediate outlook of the typeface. We knew we had to kind of get some more weights and blow it out a little bit. And then at one point, the decision was made, well, we got to have it condensed, naturally. And then we were like, that was a lot of work. I think we're done, like a year later. And it was all hinted, by the way, like big time hinting like I've never even seen or heard of before. But we weren't done because I thought it would be a good idea to add old-style figures and small caps. So we did that, and then, of course, we also had to do Greek and Cyrillic. And that was definitely Monotype's work. They owned that. I think we ran from that. But again, big family, big idea, and then ultimately with a big purpose, which is to be kind of the face and the expression of a mammoth company that had a mammoth change, and they needed to let the world know that they were different and that they meant it and they were serious about it. And so the job of the typeface was super important. It was, these are important shapes. So anyway, they use it on every fucking thing you can imagine. Caulk. Fancy kitchens, appliances, water filters. There it is in action. You need a microwave with some GE Inspira on it? How about a washer? And by the way, all of the type is GE Inspira. How about some light bulbs? Could maybe replace that one with the GE ones. Like burning my eyes. Camera. Air conditioning. Jet engines. I don't know what kind of engine this is, but it's fucking big. Banks. Online stuff. Infographics. Printed shit. More printed shit. Anyway, so a lot of years go by. 10 years. Of course, I thought GE would never, ever, ever call me back, but they did. And they finally said, you guys were right. We need a typeface that can do more, be more legible. The sausage thing, we love it, but it doesn't work in some places. So we were asked to extend the family and come up with a more robust, I think, workhorsey version of it, a sans serif still, and also a serif. And so I think the sans was a relatively easy kind of thing to get into. Like we knew, again, I like saying skeleton. I don't know why, but we wanted to keep using the skeleton, but kind of get rid of some of the things we knew probably caused problems. So the radiuses of the little sausage terminals, we reduced them. And at first we went full on right-angled square. We just thought that was the natural thing to do. But as we did it, we were like, God, it doesn't feel like GE anymore. It's still a little bit too hard. So we ended up with these very small little radiuses. And of course, we kept some of the features that Patrick had originally kind of built in that I think are the key kind of, key characteristics. We decided to change the G and nerdy stuff like you probably can't tell, but the GE Inspira has round counters in like the B, for example, and the way the stroke just goes fluidly into the vertical stroke. We wanted to kind of have a little right angle on the inside counter because we thought that was more legible. But in theory, I think it is. Of course, Paul Vanderlaan is he's more tech savvy than me for sure. And so he conducted a series of tests to make sure that tiny little radius wasn't going to bite us in the ass on screen and during any hinting issue. So they did some quick tests. We realized that it basically was it was invisible up until it became visible. There wasn't an in-between state. It was either a round little radius or it was a cornered radius in pixel land. So it was good. We kept rocking with it. And it added that little soft GE touch. And then we started to move into a serif. Again, we had to do a lot of work here, mostly, again, well, actually, these were friends of Paul, because even this hinting was beyond him. But now we moved into the serif. Well, actually, we did this simultaneously. I was working on the serif primarily in the beginning stages, helping define what it looked like. And again, we look back at the symbol, and again, we had the flesh already of the letter forms, but then we were like, oh, there's like a little ball terminal thing going on up there. Maybe our slabs, or maybe our serif should kind of take that on. So that was one of our first immediate, like, ooh, there's something nice there. And boy, it makes sense, Clarendon and like Cheltenham of the time they were, during the turn of the century, these were hot typefaces. It's a popular kind of style and approach to lettering, and that's when GE was born. So it made a lot of sense, both from the logo and from just its heritage. And so here you have, it's all starting to happen, come to life. And we only did 2 weights. There's only a regular and a bold for each. Love that little ball terminal. So there you have it. The little electrical store in my neighborhood has like GE air conditionings packed in the window all summer long. So I like walk by it every day and I just see the GE Inspira all over the place. And it's a nice buying light bulb. So it is, for me, of course, I'm keen to see it real fast. But I imagine a lot of folks get used to seeing it. So it does have that presence, I think. I think we're successful there with it. So then there's a small taste of it all. And there's just some samplings. And then at one point we gave it to them and they started using it. So here's some stuff where I think all of this is, I think they set the whole thing in the new sans serif. But I've been looking online a lot, and they mix it up. They use the GE Inspira, the original one, kind of as a display, and anything kind of smaller they use either the serif or the sans. But on occasion, as you see here, they've used the whole new sans serif. Anywho's. So hugely important, I think, to that organization, and I have to say, when we did the NBC Universal job, GE owns them as well. When we were talking to them, they were like, "Oh, we want our own typeface because we're tired of using GE Inspira. We love it, but we're not GE." So for years, some people loved it so much, and because they were owned by GE, they could have access to it. They got it, and like NBC Universal was primarily using GE Inspira, which I thought was really weird. So we talked them into making their own typeface. So Matisse, so this is kind of a smaller level, I think, of impact, but nonetheless, I think, had heavy-duty impact in the way one would experience kind of an exhibition, for example. And so starting out, MoMA and the Tate co-curated this exhibition, and it first opened in London at the Tate, and this is what they did. One, they have their own typeface, so it's not about the typeface. I think that's fine. Of course, I like it. It's got sausage terminals. But the main thing was, like, why would you do cutouts, shapes, around the word cutouts? I don't know. This is like a lot of belt and suspenders to me. So this was our inspiration to like what to avoid at all costs. So we looked at other elements of the exhibition, which were the whole like process that Matisse lived by, and how his studio was like his inspiration, and was his like it was the environment in which he lived. He made cutouts and lived in the cutouts, basically. And his walls were like this. He moved them around. He pinned them. They weren't glued until basically he died. Before that, during his lifetime, he didn't glue shit down. He just like pinned it around, moved it. He'd go to the beach house and say, "I love these shapes. Take them with me." And he'd like put them in a suitcase and go to the beach house, and he would pin them back up. And there's something really cool to that story of this old dude just like being in love with his shapes. Like me, I love my shapes. So this is what we were like, okay, what can we do here that can influence what we're going to do and how we're going to express the show? And of course, as you know already, I like type. So we basically tried to translate kind of the spirit and the fluidity of something like this and the imperfection of this, and we tried to build that into the letter forms, not by making the letter forms cutouts or wobbly themselves, but by the kind of the holistic, like the shape itself could be really clean, but like the way it was drawn or the way it sat on the page was not quite right. So we ended up using the typeface that was in the book for our inspiration, which was basically a bespoke typeface that some designers in London did for the book, and it's very Futura-esque. With slightly different moves. So it wasn't heavy enough. There was only a bold and this regular weight, which is their typeface. So we knew we wanted something really chunky because we had been sketching with other typefaces as well. So we knew we wanted to build something really fat, so we just made it. Because their typeface didn't have the weights. We wanted to kind of have some different kind of details to it ourselves. So, and this was my task in the team. With a team of designers kind of concepting all the stuff we had to make, and my thing, of course, was I got to make the letters. Can I do that one thing at least? And so anyway, this is where we ended up, and I think again it lent itself to a lot of great language that was built around like this is actually something he said. He thought that when he was doing his cutouts that he imagined he was literally cutting into a world of color, So we thought, we've got to use some of these messages. So we built out just the capital letters, and we liked this italic form, the Roman form, and we had to, of course, do a reverse italic. And then we started to apply it to stuff. So, of course, the bags were one of the first things that needed to happen because we ordered like 10 trillion of them. And so it had to be done like 9 years before the exhibition. Tote bags, the usual stuff. and cut it out. We thought that was kind of fun. So we felt that the typeface, again, was this great platform in which to say things and also express really what we felt was next to the cutouts themselves, which you're going to see. We didn't want to compete with that. We wanted to get to what was underneath the cutout. So we felt like this was doing that, this kind of flux system. But in a modern way, we're the Museum of Modern Art, so that was another kind of filter to think about. Like, it still needed to feel like it was controlled in some way, enough to feel like it came from the place known as the Museum of Modern Art. So I think together, trying to express the root of the exhibition, the story there, trying to, again, use letters to do that so we can set great words, and then also, like, is this the way MoMA would do it? Kind of as a filtering device. And so we built in a lot more packaging for magnets. Pencil bag. But my favorite is the Band-Aids that we did, because at one point in our research we found out that he actually cut himself all the time. Like, we were like, he was an old dude with giant scissors, so of course he was, ow, fuck, and there's an image of him getting his hand bandaged by an assistant. So, of course, they sold like hotcakes. Everyone loves them. But what I love about them most is just the way the Band-Aids itself, when you unfurl them, you get to see that kind of repeat pattern. And inside is a blue Band-Aid, an orange Band-Aid, and a magenta Band-Aid. And when you have the package, you can kind of faintly see those colors. So it's really nice. It has a nice... Love the Band-Aids. Coffee mugs, and here's all the stuff. But the reason I put it in here was I think, it's nice contrast to a project like GE, which is mammoth, global at scale, lasts for years and years and years, 10 years before they even came to us for the second job, so it's already been a year and a half, 2 years. So, and this thing comes and goes. It's gone already. Matisse was up for like 4 months, and these letters will die with Matisse. So I love this idea that you can do something at a grand scale and also at such a small scale, but the importance of the shape and the letters and how meaningful they are and the whole interaction and engagement with the thing, GE or an exhibition, I think you can see that they, I think, are huge. Oh yeah, we did the windows. The windows were giant MoMA logos for like 6 years, and somehow we managed to talk people into letting us do this, which was fantastic. And then, of course, the exhibition. It's the one place we did a cut, the only place. And we said to ourselves, all right, curators, if we're going to do a cut, god damn it, it's going to be fucking big. So that's what we did. So the whole wall from this side, wrapping all the way up, it's like a 70-foot cut. So here is everyone's favorite project. Why does everyone hate this? I don't know. I've never figured it out. A lot of people do, but I love it. I won't spend a lot of time on this, but it's. I don't think they used it very well. They didn't really use the identity that came along with it. They kind of made us really simplify it, and they just basically took a typeface for the most part. They didn't take all the other kind of brand elements and visual elements we wanted them to have. They left a lot of that behind. But here we did a serif and a sans serif, and to me it made a lot of sense because they basically had, NBC always had this kind of sans serif kind of grotesque-like letter forms, Art Deco-y sans serif thing, and then NBC or Universal had like copperplate, these little serifs. So we wanted to kind of just merge all these things together and see what happened and make an ugly thing. And we did. Damn good job at it. So there it is. We wanted to contrast that kind of weird, funky little hybrid typeface with kind of something that felt minimal but colorful and kind of a little bit more contemporary feeling, and they axed all this. So USA Today, This is a Wolf Olin's job, and again, I worked. Actually, I forgot to mention I worked with Bold Monday and Paul Vanderlaan on the NBCU job as well. We did that together, and then they mostly did this, but I started with the logo types. I was kind of drawing just these. We weren't thinking we were going to do a typeface yet, so I was it was Futura, but it was a badly drawn Futura. So we were just I was trying to craft it a little bit more. And at one point we were like, we got to just keep doing this. We can't use Futura. We love it, but we got to like perfect it or make changes. So we managed to convince them that we've got to do this. It's going to play a major role in the brand identity and the expression of everything you say, because they do a newspaper, for Christ's sake. So it's like you're just in there reading messages and stories, and the typeface that you're reading has to be ownable or identifiable again. So we set off with Bold Monday to design kind of a new Futura. A simple, friendly, and bold typeface, like Futura, but unique and economical, and ultimately feeling maybe a hair more contemporary. So we weren't trying to compete with Futura by any stretch, because Futura is pretty awesome. I love it. But we didn't want to just do, because otherwise we would have just used Futura or just like drawn it maybe better and just it would be Futura. So we seized the opportunity to like, all right, let's look at Futura. For a newspaper environment, what might be things that could cause some issues? So the long descenders were one. We thought that the apostrophe there was a little bit, I wouldn't say that's a friendly or editorial kind of voice embedded in that thing. And again, so the J and the Y, we added a little curls, the T, bendy terminals. We kind of, over-exaggerated. Actually, Futura doesn't have many ink traps, if any, but we kind of pushed it and wanted those ink traps to kind of be part of the nature, just to add a little bit of that kind of printing and kind of old-school quality for newspapers. Ink traps helped to some degree at the smaller sizes still. But they also added a little bit of a character to it. And then we shortened the ascenders and descenders. So Futura here, they have a very tall ascender, so conflicts in the little blue dotted zone there. And then Futura today, you can kind of set it a little bit tighter and kind of be very economical with it. And also that's a certain look that they kind of had been doing for years, since the 80s, kind of tightly set and kind of crunched up Futura. So we wanted to kind of keep that, because that stylistic move also became part of it just felt like USA Today to do that. So then when they launched, they threw it out there in a big campaign, and at first glance it's like you think it's Futura, but then you look and you're like, oh, it's not. Anyway, and again, you can see how important, like most of what you see and read from them it's big, it's simple, and it's like type. Type is the kind of the delivery system into the newspaper. For the paper, that the text face was serif, but you can see that the Futura is really showing up in a lot of places, but in small scale and large scale, so everything. Obviously, you wouldn't want to read the whole newspaper in Futura, but it's got little bits, and that texture kind of gives it that USA Today feel. And so we delivered 3 weights. Yeah, there it is. And when you see, I think just a simple move like a new apostrophe can really kind of, I think, make something approachable and feel a little bit more friendly, and like it's got a voice to it, whereas the old ones were, I don't know, they felt harsh. They didn't feel like they had a place in editorial world and kind of in the way this was used. Anyway, a lot of stuff. And then there's a bunch of type dorks. Oh, shit, that's me. No, I'm kidding. So that's it. Thank you very much. usually from, it's usually, born from a marketing need to do something. They get designers involved, the art director, creative director, and then part of the solution might be a suggestion, hey, why don't we do our own typeface? Hey, Uber, they should do one, and they're contemplating it now because it makes total sense for them. So I think more and more people are realizing how important, like you said, we know, designers know how important it is. Not everyone else knows how important it is.
Yes, but it costs a shitload of money to do it. And how can you?
No, I mean it does, but this is why I focused on the bigger kind of projects for the most part, except for the Matisse thing. But GE, they can afford it. I mean, if they were spending hundreds of thousands of dollars every year for licensing, and Apple, like, I don't get it. Like, why aren't they not making typefaces? They just license, and they spend hundreds of thousands of dollars every fucking year licensing, stuff from the libraries when they should be making their own typeface. The OS and Apple operating system is their brand. You're sitting there living every fucking day, in the phone and all these interfaces, and it's got like system fonts on it. This drives me mad. And they're going to build did you guys hear about this? They're going to build a trillion-acre solar farm so they can power their entire business in Cupertino. It's like, all right, you're going to spend billions there. Can you mind giving me like 300 grand to do some typeface for you, jokers? But yeah, it's typically a design-driven idea that then gets pitched to the management folks, and they're convinced or go, oh yeah, go do it, good idea.
Is it difficult to convince them?
I think to penetrate into the management, yeah, I think it's difficult. I mean, how often do you see corporate typefaces in the world? I mean, half of them are just kind of retooling of typefaces off the shelf, so they're not really like the new. There's GE, there's Nokia, Microsoft has done a great job developing Sego. It's years and years of just dedication to have their own typeface. That's the thinking. To me, that's a modern way of thinking for these businesses, and that's it. I can't think of it anymore. Audi has a great new custom typeface by Bold Monday, guys I work with. I mean, they're out there for sure, but not enough. I think we could triple the amount of custom typefaces. By tomorrow morning, I could have a list of 40 companies that should all have custom typefaces. No one's doing it. I mean, that's sometimes, but I design. I mean, like Brando, which I didn't show here, but that's the shapes of the glyphs. I did pretty much all of them. I have at one point, and for Milo Serif, I did pretty much everything. And Paul van der Laan, in those cases, kind of finishes up like a couple glyphs I never got to, and then he does interpolations and helps refine kind of some kerning and spacing, kind of more the technical aspects. But in some other cases, I do less of the design. I help up front, maybe it's establish look and feel and kind of sketch. We're all sketch. Like for GE, it was great. Like Paul and Peter mostly worked on the sans serif. I had some sketches when I thought where it should go. They take that and honed it, and then I jumped on the serif and built out like the regular weight and the italic. And then I don't do everything. I just do upper lower case and some numbers and punctuation. And then they take it. So it is like I consider like a hefty duty part of the design. But I don't start and finish typefaces. I'm somewhere heavy duty up front, and then I taper off as it really gets into the full-on development. For Futura today, I was really more of like an art director. I kind of sketched out some stuff on the logos and said, hey guys, you guys know what you're doing, like, go kick ass. So it just depends on what the situation is. But,
and do you have time now at MoMA to do it?
Kiwi and I spent years on before anyone even saw it. So Kiwi to Milo and Brando are like really like they're my type designs all the way kind of to a long way through. No. No, my life is really weird. I may not do much with the typeface for like 5-6 months even, to a few months, and then one day I'll like just get this urge to like start jamming on it, and I do it when I get home at night. I've learned really well to I can actually lie on my back on my sofa with one leg up on the back pillow and the laptop here, and I don't have a mouse. I design using my mouse pad. It's pathetic, but I did like all of Brando hairline done that way on my back in the middle of the night. So yeah, I'm a weird dude. Yes, that's where we first started. We wanted to do those types of things with cut. We explored obvious cuts to very subtle, like where at first glance you didn't know it was maybe cut, and then as you look you can see that it was, maybe not quite right. But in the end we just felt like that was too obvious, so we avoided any notion of cutting with the form itself.
You do compositionally?
No, compositionally we wanted to, we didn't want to make it feel like it was a cut. We wanted to feel like it was placed, like like those letters had been tacked on the wall. So that's why they were not perfect, but they were clustered together like Matisse did. So it was all about kind of the way, capturing the way he worked,
So
rather than cutouts, because you're going to go see the show full of fucking cutouts. Why would I, like, to me it was like, I am not going to have any inkling of cutout communication in what we do, because the show's called Cutouts and you're going to see the best cutouts I've ever done, so why would we even go there? No, the team, we explored all that, we explored everything. We had multiple directions that they had done, and in the end we kept looking at stuff, and one of the cutout-y type things made it to the finish line, and then there was kind of this direction that Sabine had been working on. And she was first doing it with like, may have been using like Flama or something, heavy, and was doing the same kind of thing. We were forced just kind of sketching with the reverse italic, and it was at the very end when we said, shit, we should just make our own like typeface so it works with that other one from the book, just to try to have some relationship to the catalog. Politics, because at the time, Comcast had bought the majority of NBCU from GE.
Right.
And so Comcast was involved, and they just wanted to have something kind of bare bones, very dry, clean, and minimal, just to avoid, they were moving very fast, and they were trying to, that went public, and they just wanted to have like a simple identity. And it went from, we want a typeface, because we don't want to use GE Inspira anymore, to like, ooh, shit, we should probably redo our whole identity. And it turned into the logo and identity job at the same time. And we, of course, showed them a lot more stuff, and they were just, nah, we just want this typeface and a logo, pick some colors for us, and then like, get out of Dodge. So it was a bit of a bummer. I mean, we gave them the color palette, and some simple things, but like, we had shown them much cooler, I think more, way more expressive and just, I think, more contemporary feeling stuff. It felt right. And they just chose to be boring as fuck.
Yeah, because in practice they just use the typeface and purple.
Yeah, purple, yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it. That's what we basically handed them that with some kind of ways to maybe treat type and stuff, but that was all we ended up doing. All the other work we did, they just said thanks, no thanks, so we don't want it. It's not like we did a ton of it, but we had, what we did have, it was enough for them to take something and go do it like really well and cooler, but they just didn't. Brando sans serif, which I'm digging a lot. That's in the works, that's well underway. Some of you know Milo Slab was released some months ago, which I like. I worked with that's another great project where Christian hooked me up with someone that had been helping him, and he really like helped. Again,
it would be like 2 years out from now by the time I did anything on it. So he really helped take it and fill it out, and he actually made some design decisions, and he's listed as a designer. He contributed to the design of Milo Slab, although a lot of it was there, and I sketched out, again, I'll put lowercase for all 3 poles, so thin, regular, and bold, but then there was so much left to do, and he did it, and along the way there's some serious decisions to make as well that he would do and show me alterations, and what do you think, and we talk about it. So it's a great, that collaboration, I need to work that way, to kind of make, otherwise I'm just not making typefaces, because at one point I kind of stop, and I don't have time to get into that nitty gritty. I'd rather like let it sit there and go start another one. So it's a perfect marriage of someone who can kind of take it and also like move it further to the finish line. I got something. Last year I went to the Morgan Library. They've got a Gutenberg Bible there. And I was kind of racing to go see that thing first. It's like, go in. It's kind of dark in there and gloomy, beautiful. And I'm looking, and I'm talking to my wife, and we're roaming around. I'm looking at the Gutenberg Bible, and then I kind of look down at the label, and it's set in Kiwi. Like 6 inches, like away from the Gutenberg Bible. So that was a big moment for me. Yeah. Question. I talk about that all the time because as a graphic designer, the clients just shit on your work over and over and over, point their little finger around, they know everything better, right? So you got to endure a lot of that. You got even your own internal people like marketeers, like to all of them. But with type, when you present that to a client, they're all just looks good. Go with it. So that's my favorite part about type. But I love presenting type. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's really, the clients, it's hard. Like you're asking them to look. What are they going to say? Just, the most they say is like, maybe it's not friendly enough, or is it right? And, they have these very vague kind of things, and you can kind of address most of them fairly easy. But they definitely don't start pointing their fingers around, telling you what to do, what's better. Maybe that curve, hey, Mike, work on that key. It doesn't happen. You come to the table and say, hey, look, here's serifs. There's this kind of a serif, that kind of a serif. These are from this time. These say this. These communicate these. This is very deco. So if you look like that, it's deco. Is that right for you? Or you talk like that, and they go, oh no, we don't want to be deco. We want to be modern and future. And then you're like, okay, well, what does that look like? Well, you said you wanted to be a serif, So what does a modern futuristic serif look like? So then you try to guide them. But that's kind of fun and easy for type people to do. It's kind of, I almost enjoy educating, because they're always happy too. Like they're always like, wow. I see lots of opportunities. One, I see great environments for bespoke typefaces, like apps and things like that, where businesses that's basically the whole way you experience the business is through the app, and what's basically in the app. So definitely like bespoke, and then improvement-wise, I think it's been something I've always bitched about since I did my first website years ago. I feel like the experience and education and the practice of typography is missing in the digital environment to some degree, because a lot of people start going into that environment without that background. Because you can learn the tools, you can learn how to code, you can go make an app and never have taken any typography ever. You don't even have to really know anything about fonts. You can go make an app. and make a business and have it flourish. And it can look like shit, and it will work, and so like, there's lots of that going on. So I would say, imagine if every developer, app developer and coder had to take like type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4, type 5, and 6 in advanced typography before they did any of that. Just imagine what the world would look like. That's all I can tell you.
Thank you.